Hello and welcome to Identity Office Hours. I'm your host, Mike Schwartz, founder of Glue, and today is episode 86. OpenID for Verifiable Credentials Update is the topic. Our guests today are Kristina Yasuda and Torsten Lauderstedt. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Hello.
And before we dive into it, I'm going to do something a little bit different, and I'm going to ask people to subscribe to the Identity Office Hours LinkedIn company page. You'll get notifications about new events. And as our community gets bigger, we get special privileges if we have more numbers. So please hit subscribe. I normally do that at the end, but I don't know who actually makes it to the end. They're moving it up. And before we dive into this topic, I'd love it if you guys introduce yourself. Kristina, how did you become a digital identity verifiable credentials guru?
Great question. Hi, everyone. My name is Kristina. I originally got into the topic when we were trying to solve the problem of access to opportunities for marginalized populations. So we were working with refugees, single mothers in Bangladesh, Zambia, and the big problem was like, how do I access to services? And when I access to services, I need to identify who I am. And, that's how I got into the topic. And I think originally we were prototyping and we learned that, there's a cool thing called Verifiable Credentials emerging. And slowly I started to get more and more involved in the technical side because unfortunately, 10 years ago already, that was not very ready. Standards were not very ready. And I think I found my place initially as a standards, in standards development. And then, from Japan, moved to America, and very recently moved all the way to Germany. Have been enjoying my times there. So, yeah, that's me.
And how's your German coming?
They're good.
So, Torsten, you have a long and illustrious career. We've known each other for years. Why don't you tell the audience, just give the audience an idea of your trajectory?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a technical background. I'm a software engineer and, close to 30 years now in industry. Oh my God. And I did my PhD in computer science in the area of security. So doing model-driven security to build secure systems in a reliable fashion. And I kind of stumbled then into identity at Deutsche Telekom. Did some consumer identity stuff there and also started enjoying to work in standards. And already at that time, I realized standards are important for adoption of such solutions. I started my standardization career with OAuth 2. So I did the security threat analysis with a couple of other folks for OAuth 2 and did other stuff. Yeah, develop products. I have always developed products in that space, consumer identity products. And lately or recently or 2 years ago, I joined the Federal Agency for Breakthrough Innovation in Germany to lead the German project for the European Digital Identity Wallet. Yeah, that's me.
Okay, so let's dive into it. Kristina, you're going to put you on the hot seat, and you're going to be in the hot seat initially for a little bit here. We're going to keep giving you the questions, and then Torsten might have some follow-up, but here we go. This is just a general question. I think a lot of our audience, they know a lot about this topic already, but let's just start maybe for people who don't know. What problem does OpenID for verifiable credentials solve, and why is it important now?
That's an easy question, Mike. I'm joking. Yeah, so I think majority of identity flows, authentication flows we see right now is relying party talking directly to identity provider who has certain information about the users, and upon user consent, the data gets released to the relying party, right? And I think with some privacy concerns, like new use cases emerging, digital economy push, this new model of kind of putting user control agent in the middle, where a relying party talks to something that many people call wallet these days. And then that wallet, by that point, has information about the user, from the issuer of original source of that information, and user gets to release that information directly to the relying party upon, like more transparency, more user control, more privacy, whatnot. So that's kind of the shift or emergence we're seeing in the industry. And what OpenID VC stack of protocols do is they are standards how to present from the wallet to the relying party that user data, and how you issue that data from the issuer into the wallet. So like those two parts are mainly what the OpenID VC protocols try to solve.
And I would like to add that in the end, this is the shift we see from federated identity to what people might call decentralized identity. At the same time, it's not just identity. The scope is getting much, much broader. What we're seeing is that wallets are used for all kinds of authentic data, right? Things of tickets, prescriptions, driver's license, and so on. And that also goes hand in hand with other channels. So it's no longer just online. It's also offline proximity, meaning if you've got a credential, how it is called, you can present that in a proximity situation or the point of sales for opening a door, or you can present it online. So and that's the space where OpenID for VC provides a protocol for exchanging this kind of credentials.
So it's OpenID for VC is just one of the sort of a number of different protocols. There's also DIDCOM, and there's, I guess you could say, W3C Verifiable Credentials itself. What is the OpenID part actually doing here? And how does it differentiate from these other technologies or standards?
Yeah, when we identified that problem, that there is a need for a protocol to present an issue that, like like more data, digital data online. We did make a decision to base it on, namely, to leverage existing, knowledge of security, implementation experience, whatnot, existing developer community, implementers community, and I think we've been doing really good. We have seen a lot of adoption, mainly, for example, in Europe. The protocols are being widely used for EIDAS2 implementation in America, for mobile driver license implementation in Japan, Australia, other countries around the world, even in Africa and some Southeast Asian countries through MOSIP's work. We have a really good ecosystem of implementers. And we really do try to listen implementers' feedback. So we have introduced changes, including breaking changes. It's never taken lightly. It's always like with the, it's because there are implementers who did an interoperability event and said, hey, we think it's going to work better this way. So these interop events they're a lot. It's actually, it's hard to keep up. Like it's like every month, someone somewhere is trying to interoperate using these protocols. We have a good support from security community. We have security research, security analysis coming up, which also, helps us make certain decisions. And last but not least, what I wanted to mention was the conformance tests. I think that has been helping a lot of people to make sure they're compliant with the latest version of specifications and that also helps interoperate, because if you know you're compliant, that increases your chances of working with other implementations. So I think that's what I can, say how we've been progressed.
Right. And Torsten, I was trying to also get at maybe what are some of the adjacent technologies, and how does OpenID fit in the landscape of some of these other technologies or standards?
Yeah, I mean, basically, you mentioned W3C Verifiable Credentials, and OpenID for VC is not an alternative. OpenID for VC is the protocol for exchanging credentials, and W3C Verifiable Credentials is one of the formats that has been extensively used in conjunction with OpenID for VC already. When we started developing OpenID for VC, we made a very fundamental and important decision to design a protocol that works with different credential formats. most
I remember
protocols.
your spreadsheet of all the different credential
Oh, yeah,
formats, and there were a lot.
we had some work. I mean, IIW is always amazing and we had started the work around credential formats, and we figured out there are so many credential formats. It is an emerging space, and so tying the protocol to a certain format would basically limit implementers' choice. So that's why we focus on the protocol layer, implementing the protocol in interoperable fashion, and then allowing people to use that with different credential formats. I see that in Brazil, for example, NRCreds are being used. Excellent. The first prototype we ever demonstrated of OpenID for VP at EIC back in 2021, I think, worked with NRCreds. And you will also see in OpenID for VP specification, there's a profile for that credential formats. So it can be used with different formats. Has been used also with SDJOT, with ISO MDoc, and going forward, I think there will be other formats. So that's how we position it. So it can be combined with those, and also DITCOM can be combined with OpenID for VC. So we work with other standards bodies, right? I mean, this is very important for us. So we work with ETSI, with ISO, with W3C, with Cloud Signature Consortium. We had a call just today to kind of combine the technologies to build better solutions. And the strength of DITCOM is the long-lasting multi-hop secure connection, whereas OpenID for VC is optimized for the identity use case. And you can combine them if you have use cases that spawn those different capabilities.
Interesting. So Kristina, you're well aware. I don't know. Is it draft 24, draft 26? There's been a
24,
lot of
you got
drafts.
it. 24.
Okay, 24. So, I mean, and that's the result of a lot of interaction with the market, as you've saying, like a lot of interops and a lot of, it sounds good until you actually try it. It does make you wonder, though, what are the key changes that took place, and what should people be aware of right now? And I hear of some of these projects are really sounding like they might happen soon, like some of the European wallet adoption. I guess the question is, what's the current status of are we close to a standard or to finalizing this? And what have been some of the most important changes recently, especially?
Great question. Thank you for asking. So first, for timelines, our plan that working group is working hard towards is to publish the final 1.0 version of specifications of OpenID for VP, VCI, and Hype around end of June. That's a plan, right? And so and after that, we obviously continue working on the specifications, but we only extend them. Like, we don't introduce breaking changes. So then we're going to have 1.1, 1.2. So, we have a lot of extensibility points. So we keep building on them. But no more breaking changes after end of June is a current plan to, give stability to the market and see convergence around, one version of final specification. In terms of new features, I'll cover OpenID for Verifiable Presentations, and Torsten will cover for the issuance side. So for OpenID for VP, the presentation side, I think one big update we did was for the query language. That's how relying party specifies to the wallet, hey, I'm asking for this credential, this attributes. If you don't have that credential, you can give me that credential. I'm asking either for age over 18 Boolean, or if you don't have it, you can also give me the birth date. Like, that's kind of what we're talking about here. And we used to use presentation exchange, but then there was an overwhelming implementation feedback for something simpler that incorporates the use cases and all that. So there is a new query language called Digital Credentials Query Language, for in short, DACO. We really like the acronym. So DACO, everyone. Well, welcome to DACO.
Is that based on something? It's very hard to invent a query language. Did you find some other query language that you modeled it on, or it's completely made up?
I would say it was informed by our earlier work on extended claim syntax for OpenID for Connect for identity assurance. So it was done by Daniel Fett, so might ring a bell. So he's very, very experienced in designing this kind of language.
So yeah, it was combined experience. So from other corners of identity, it was the experience we have presentation exchange, and we did go through a very thorough exercise of collecting requirements from the implementers, like first agreeing on a solid bullet points of requirements to make sure like we really took this like transition seriously. So that that goal is one big thing. Another big thing that have been exciting a lot of people is a mechanism to combine transaction authorization when presenting the credential. The mechanism is called transaction data, but that unlocks two big use cases that are currently aware of, probably more in the future. And those two are payments and qualified electronic signatures in Europe. So basically, when you're identifying the user, you can also bind that user identity to a specific transaction authorization by the same user. And that's been like, exciting a lot of implementers. And another thing is digital credentials API. So in this new three-party model, the new thing is user might be starting a transaction with your line party on one device, on laptop, let's say, and then but the user's credential is stored on the mobile phone, for example, right? In that case, like how do you have that cross-device interaction securely, because you don't have the same device session binding that OAuth and OpenID Connect is based on mainly. So that was one big problem. And also wallet selection. How do you give user the choice to choose which wallet you want to use based on what your line party is asking for? And we've been working closely with the browser providers to provide that, browser and mobile operating system providers, because
I
those
think
are
I saw a demo of this at IIW,
yeah,
where the Chrome and the Safari teams, maybe the Apple and the Google team, showed how they could scan a QR code from the website on their phone. Is that related to what you're saying?
that's the line. Yeah. So the kind of layer link separation has been those companies, and they're both members of OpenAid Foundation, and we've working within the DCP working group together. But they provide this kind of layer that relying party can call, and OpenAid VP is how you communicate what relying party wants on top of it. So they kind of work in conjunction. So we're basically defining within OpenAid VP specification how does that OpenAid VP request over the browser API looks like. Yeah, so that's what we're doing there. And last but not the least, like I wanted to highlight that I think a lot what drives the decisions is the wallet, the architecture design where the wallet can function without the backend, right? Like so the key management, credential storage, like ideally being handled within the phone, so there's no server listening in, or from a privacy perspective. So like I think that decision was a big one. I mean, I think some early implementations like do use cloud or server for key management or whatnot,
Cloud
but they've
wallet almost, right?
yeah, but even there, I think a lot of effort is going into like how to make sure the server does not see the actual data. So
Mhm.
like you're sending just the pre-hash that just like before signing, right? Like so backend signs because it trusts its own app, but it doesn't know what's actually the content of
Mm,
what's signing, for example, right? Like so that like we try to be like true to that design goal.
interesting. Torsten, new stuff that's in the spec that you want to talk about?
Absolutely. So, I mean, what we have seen is, I mean, when we started, most of the use cases were more, I would say, in the substantial security area. But and now, due to the advent of the European Digital Identity Award, for example, and other places, security requirements that we see in the wild are significantly increasing, and also privacy requirements. And along those lines, we have extended OpenID for verifiable credential issuance, for example, with mechanisms that devices and wallet implementations can use to prove to issuers of credentials, for example, that the key a certain credential is bound to has certain security capabilities. So it's called key attestation. So key attestation was integrated, and also wallet attestation. So we are really tying up security and improving the security and increasing the security capabilities of the specification so that we can even achieve the highest security levels with the protocol while keeping it interoperable. So a lot of people think that it's very hard, or to come up with interoperability on the issuance side? I would say yes. But we have taken on this challenge, and I think we have come up with a pretty good solution. I've seen a lot of implementations on that, and so and another aspect is on the privacy.
Can I just pause you there for 1 second?
Yes.
You talked about attestation, and this is a word that I think it's like the word of 2024. What type of data is in that attestation about the key? And is this an attestation from the phone, or is it an attestation from Google or Apple? How can we trust that attestation?
Yeah, I mean, basically, when it comes to key attestations, this is always about trust, either in the party that produced the hardware security module or the security module in general, or the platform that you use for your wallet. So what we typically see in our implementations is that the attestations provided by the platform, for example, on Google, there is key attestation, are used and then converted into something that is portable, because we do not want the issuers to rely or to dependent on platform-specific attestation formats, or also to learn things that are in those attestations. Because basically what an issuer needs to know is, well, this key is secure enough so I can trust the wallet to securely manage the presentation of that credential. So what it typically does, it conveys, for example, a level of assurance, something like that, but it's really minimal data set. There is a small list of data in the specification that gives rise to that.
Okay, I'm sorry I interrupted you. So attestation was one area.
No problem. I never have
a second one.
With having a lively discussion. I mean, I'm so passionate about that topic, so I can talk for hours. And the next topic is privacy, clearly, right? As Kristina pointed out, the design of OpenID for VC always has the center, has privacy in the center of our considerations. And one aspect she pointed out, I mean, you can build cloud wallets, web wallets, whatever you want, but you can also build wallets on the phone without any backend. So this is one aspect. And one other aspect that we included in OpenID for BCI is batch issuance. What is this all about? This is about RP to RP correlation. So if you use OpenID for OpenID Connect, that's a no-brainer, right? You are generating a new PPID, a pseudonymous identifier, and you're done. With the new wallet-based model, it's a bit more difficult, because the issuer issues a credential, and that credential gets presented to different relying parties. If this credential is a very anonymous credential and just has a public key to sign with, then this public key becomes a correlation identifier. To overcome that, in combination with traditional cryptography, what we are adopting is an approach that is called batch issuance. So you use every credential instance only once. So for example, if you get a driver's license, you don't get the driver's license, you get 20 instances of your driver's license and you use them up, right? That's what is done today. I mean, people might say, okay, why don't you use zero knowledge proofs? Wow, excellent question. We will be trying to do so, but in the end, right now, there is a I would say the biggest challenge is that most of those security algorithms are not recognized by government authorities. And if you're building highly secure applications, that also needs to be achieved. We are working on that, but up until we reach that point where we can use CKP, we would use batch issuance, and that's why we have incorporated that into the protocol.
Interesting. Yeah, and my cynical take on zero trust, zero knowledge proofs is that it's always easier said than done. Like, it's a good idea, but actually, like, nailing it down is tricky. One clarification about that. Last week we had Paul Bastian and Christian Borman on, and they were talking about attestation-based authentication, which was about sort of like a one-time authentication where I'm not going to come back and authenticate, but I'm just doing this one time. Is that related to what you're talking about, Torsten?
Yes, it is. It is. So, I mean, Paul and Christian are also part of the DCP working group, and what they have done with the client attestation-based authentication over at IETF or working group is used in our specification to actually authenticate the wallet. Because beside the fact that that the issuer wants to know whether the key has certain properties, the issuer also might want to know whether the wallet fulfills certain requirements. So, for example, in the eIDAS space, wallets need to be certified and recognized. And the fact that they are recognized is represented by such a attestation that Paul and Christian are working on. So it nicely ties into the OpenID for VC work.
So would you say that it's about the wallet authentication, not the person, not the credential about the person that's being presented? This is really just about the authentication of the wallet itself, the piece of software?
It is basically a combination between the piece of software and the operator of that piece of software. Yeah.
Okay.
So for example, when the wallet gets the credential issued from the issuer, right? The issuer checks, like for example, in the EU, right? Like the issuer checks, is this really an EU member state certified wallet? That's the wallet attestation piece kicks in based on the draft that, is being done in my TF by Paul and Christian. And then like when after issuer verified that and authenticated the user, that's a separate step, right? Issuer has to authenticate the user to know what data to put into the credential, right? So issuer has that data, and then because there's cryptographic binding happening, issuer also wants to know like whether the key material I'm about to bind to this user data to, is that key material, like good enough for me, secure enough for me, and that's where key attestation kicks in. So it's kind of like step-by-step process throughout the issuance process.
But it also shows that the three-party model is much, much harder to get secured than the federated model.
I was going to say that. I have to say, I do think you guys are working way harder than this first go around of Federation, where we just had IDP and SP. And there's the complexity, I think, especially of the wallet being something that the user controls, makes this like much more difficult. And the 3 entities versus 2 entities. Yeah, I think people don't realize how complicated this really is. Kristina, you mentioned some deployments earlier. I'd love to talk a little bit about real-world deployments and what are some of the industries or use cases that are adopting this first that you're seeing?
Yeah, let me start with European Union. So last week, so there's EIDAS 2 regulation that kind of mandates member states to implement the wallet for all the citizens and residents in the EU, and they have identified certain use cases, and they have a mechanism to, implement it and test it, which are called large-scale pilots. And one of them, Potential, had an interoperability event last week, and I happened to be there, and I was impressed. I was like really, really impressed because there were like 10 plus member states. Most of them brought both wallet and their relying party. And for example, German prototype wallet was able to work with 7, 8 relying parties. Like the scope was, to your point, the use case was something called PID. It's basically a digital version of the national ID card in Europe, like using that in MDoc or SD.VC format. And it was like this great manifestation of like seeing interoperability being facilitated at that scale, right? Obviously we have, room to go to aligning on the versions and, all that, but like that was good. But speaking of the use cases, I think at least within Potential, so one is digitizing the government. So it was a government transaction. I think many governments are investing in digitizing them, right? And like making that easier with digital identity. 2 is bank, so anything related to financial sector, right? Bank account opening, payments, all that. Then mobile driving license. I think that's the one, like surprisingly, that gets talked a lot to about, because I think some deployments in America are, pretty ahead. And mobile driving license, for example, they're having an international interoperability event in this month, and I have a feeling it will be like a similar aha moment for many people I had last week, where it's like, oh my God, like 10 plus implementations off the shelf, like working, right?
And that's using the mobile driver's license credential format, right? Just to be clear.
That one probably going to be MDoc only, but like for
Yeah.
Potential that I'm talking about, that was a SDJOT BC as well. And yeah, there are e-prescriptions or healthcare sector use cases. Doing good, and it's European specific, but qualified electronic signatures. Again, when the user wants to sign a specific digital document, you have to identify the user. So how do you do that? Using the wallet. And last but not the least, the mobile number, the kind of mobile number portability, and how do you bind user identity to your
Mm.
telecommunication stuff. So those are, for
Torsten,
example, what I seen closely. Yeah.
Torsten, any thoughts on what's interested you about how you're seeing adoption in the real world? Any surprises for you?
I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I mean, when I started my journey here, I was assuming it's all about identity. So the biggest surprise to me, and it was really the aha moment, to realize this is much more than just identity. It's about opening doors, opening cars, getting medicine through a prescription, all that stuff. So it's in the end, it will be ubiquitous. That was the biggest surprise when I entered that scene as an old school identity chap, I would say. Yeah, but learning all those use cases as we are going, and we have a huge project also underway in Germany where we are talking to parts or to all people in society what use cases they want to tackle, and this is simply amazing. Age verification wasn't mentioned so far. That's also one of the use cases, but I would say there are use cases coming up every day.
Yeah, to throw in some more keywords, I think a lot of people are definitely interested in like what people call legal person identity. So not just natural person, not just me as an individual, but like legal person, legal entity as well. Yeah, just to throw in a few more keywords.
So most of these use cases we've talked about have been about presenting identity. Is there one that you can think of that is a non-identity use case? I'm trying to figure out, Torsten, what the use case is.
Kristina mentioned payments, right? Let's take that as an
Yeah,
example,
yeah.
right? I mean, I wasn't really aware, but that might have been a surprise. I wasn't aware of how much desire there is to have a simple means to pay using the wallet, either by an account-to-account payment or any other means. So there is really a desire to have a simple, standardized way to use the wallet for that, with clear attestation of a security level, right? That is something that the wallet can people provide with. So having the wallet, and what you do is you install a payment instrument. This is not about your identity. It's about installing something that represents your banking account or your credit card or whatsoever in the wallet. And then you use that with transaction data to authorize a payment. This is not related to your identity. It's a completely different thing.
Yeah, no, and I can see that it doesn't matter, right? If I pay you, you don't need to know who I am in a lot of cases, and that's how cash works. Yeah,
Exactly. The financial institution needs to make sure that the financial institution is able to identify you for anti-money laundering purposes. But when your payment, that should be anonymous, basically at best, right? I mean, like cash. So cash for me is a reference. In the same way as for privacy for the wallet, the physical wallet is a reference. No one can observe what you do, right? And that's the same. That's the same for payments. And prescription might be similar. And what the payment we're talking about is not just online; it's also offline. I mean, going forward, I could envision that you use your wallet in the same way as you do it with proprietary solutions today to pay in a shop in the same way as you pay on a website.
So, Kristina, I want to pivot a little bit towards interoperability. We had a previous guest who talked about the 3-wallet problem. You probably didn't hear this episode, but it was quite interesting. He said the point at which the end user downloads the 3rd digital wallet, they start to basically give up on the whole idea, basically get overloaded. So potentially, there could be multiple different wallets, and I think that's desirable. Multiple different credential issuers, verifiers. So how does OpenID for verifiable credentials does it help with this interoperability? Can it help with the wallet problem, or is it just a non sequitur, you think?
I was thinking about something like that. I think listening to the previous question, that global perspective is interesting in the sense that some use cases value, for example, government issued credentials, while for some other use cases that is not essential. Like they have their own authentic, trusted issuer that they are willing to trust, like, like banks, for example, right? Like, or like in the payment. And there's definitely this kind of different like security requirements in different places where, like in the EU, they're very like pretty, clear. Like there is a framework with the regulation and implementing act and architecture reference framework versus other jurisdictions, like, like that framework is not as kind of strictly set as in Europe. And also, like to your point, there are different type of wallet providers. Like for example, we had this perspective brought in by global providers, which are present in pretty much every single country, who are like, yeah, like we are planning to operate this in every single country in the world. Like, and we don't want this bottleneck and this bottleneck and that bottleneck, right? Like, and that kind of also brings in a new perspective how you try to architect and design things. So I think that's what we were trying to facilitate. I think to your original question, the hypothesis is that there will be huge number of relying parties, then certain number of trusted issuers, and certain number of wallets. Like I don't think anyone wants a world where there's only one or two or three wallets. I think we want to provide user choice in the competition between different wallet providers. So we definitely want competition and choice in wallet space as well. But to your point, yeah, I think there will be like less variety than for issuers and verifiers. But yeah, we're trying to make sure that, like in ideal world, right? Like verifier in Japan can get a credential issued by Australia from a wallet certified and built in Austria. Like, I don't know, right? Like that's, I think and I think our protocols, like OpenID Verifiable Credential protocols are on a really, really good track to enabling that worldview.
Interesting.
Yeah, I would agree, because I mean, in the end, from a technical standpoint, you need to somehow agree on certain checkboxes, right? What protocol, what credential format, signature algorithms, key management, and so on and so on and so on. We are providing one incredency, and it's being broadly adopted because it's simple to use and fulfills the requirements. So that's one way to look into that. When it comes to global interoperability, much more is important, because there is also then legal aspects, regulation, and all that stuff. And I guess it's some way to go. Yeah. And it can be done on the level of one jurisdiction. So Open Wallet Forum, for example, is exactly working on that, working on global interoperability. I forgot to mention that I'm advising also the Open Wallet Foundation. And yeah, the global interoperability is really something that I'm also passionate about. And I think it's an even more longer way to go. The first step we are now doing in Europe is to really define the technical infrastructure. So a relying party and an issuer knows what to expect. That's important, right? You need to eliminate choice or options. You need to focus on a certain options regarding protocols, credential formats, and signature algorithms, and so on. And then hopefully going forward on an international level, people can also agree on using such a subset of technology or a certain stack. And that would be a technical way forward. And we hope OpenID for VC at least will contribute to that.
And speaking of use cases, right? Like I think my dream is like this, what we're building now is becomes an infrastructure of a digital world, right? Like just like, I don't know if water and electricity are the best analogy, but like, like it's there and anyone can freely use it. And that unlocks like a better, richer user experience on the web, maybe solving some mental health issues on the web. Because like now, I can differentiate my personas online even better. Like for example, right? So I think in an ideal world, like, we would see a lot of use cases that we can't even think of right now emerge, like once we put that fabric, in place, and that's what we're trying to do right now.
Mike, if time permits, I would like to take one question that popped up in the chat.
Okay. If I could just pause 1 second there on the chats. To the audience, we're going to continue this conversation on LinkedIn to answer these questions on the chat. Anyone posting on YouTube, I would encourage them to post on LinkedIn It's a little bit easier to have one place to post. Also, there's a Restream bot that sometimes deletes the messages from YouTube, which is really annoying. So please post on LinkedIn. Torsten, go ahead if there's one in particular. There's been some couple of great comments that we haven't had time to answer, but please, if you want to address one of them. Which one?
Just one of those caught my attention because it's about, do you think mainstream adoption is still premature and what it takes? Because it adds to the discussion we had just right now. I think the technology has evolved over the last 4 years pretty dramatically. So I think we have reached a point where large-scale deployments can be built, and there are a large-scale deployment being built and rolled out in the European Union as we are speaking. And I think we will learn a lot of what is gonna work. Now we have the right balance between privacy and security aspects and also usability and all that stuff. So I think now is the right time, but it also takes, I would say, legal underpinning and political will, because the three-party model has one specific challenge. It is you need to have the wallets deployed. And all the other parties, the issuers and relying parties, will need to be sure that those wallets can be used, are deployed, and are usable. And this kind of infrastructure is, for example, rolled out in the European Union based on the IIWs regulation. So it also takes political will and regulation to make it happen.
I'm guessing that's what I was just going to ask you the biggest challenges, but I'm thinking that's the one that you would probably say. Am I right?
Big challenges. There are a lot of big challenges. I mean, this is by far the biggest challenge in really building an ecosystem. But this is not directly related to OpenID for VC. I mean, there are also challenges. This is really a huge challenge, and we are trying to also cope with that challenge in the German wallet project. When it comes to OpenID for VC, what has been a big challenge for us in the past was that it might sound weird, the speed of the development that we have. We have such a great.
It's too fast, not too slow, right?
We are sometimes. I think we are too fast because we have a tremendous community of implementers that gives us implementers feedback. They have ideas. There's a constant stream of ideas coming in how we could improve the protocol, make it better, make it easier, make it more flexible. And we're trying our best as working group chairs together with Josephine and to in the end facilitate that discussion. But on the other hand, and there's also regulatory challenges that we need to cope with. But on the other hand, people want to have stable specs. Yeah. And I totally understand that, right? And we have struggling for some time, I would say, to find the balance. But now, as Kristina pointed out, we want to go to final specification to really have that stable one revision of the specification, because right now there are floating different implementations based on different I would say revisions of the specification. But this is one of the challenges that we have to cope with, and we're trying our best to solve that within the next couple of months.
Kristina, before we go to last thoughts, do you have any thoughts on the biggest challenges right now for OpenID, for verifiable credentials specifically, or the ecosystem?
It actually just occurred in my head just now, but I think it's interesting how adoption of OpenID for VC have so many external dependencies. Like, it's not just up to OpenID for VC, right? I think what we're trying to do now is to go to final, give people a stable transport protocol for issuance and presentation that has enough flexibility to meet different use cases, including, zero-knowledge proofs, different credential formats, algorithms, whatnot. But then we are dependent on actual success of those, for example, zero-knowledge proof stuff, or with trust frameworks being in place, right? Actual registries and certificate authorities being in place, and even the digital credentials API, right? We actually right now, it's not there yet, unfortunately, right? But we need it to be there to actually make it work with the work we've been done so hard. So I think that's kind of an interesting, and I'm not saying it's just on those external things. Obviously, we're doing our best to help and provide feedback everywhere. And I think that's where we have this great vital community, and the communication greatly improved between all these different pieces. And that gives me a lot of hope, because we're actually talking, we're actually collaborating. It's I think as much as I said, there's this external dependency, it's good that I think we do share, okay, OpenID for VC goes to final here. Then these credential formats, is VC, for example, goes final. And then the browser API goes final. And we have step by step, we have this rough roadmap how to get to this ideal world where it happens seamlessly for billions of users online around the world.
Right. To the tools and the rules. It reminds me a little bit of FIDO and passkeys too. We needed the hardware, we needed the browser, we
Yeah.
needed the protocols. It was all the authenticators. Yeah. So let's go into last thoughts. Torsten, I'll let you go first. Last thoughts, action
Yeah,
items,
yeah,
anything?
action items. I think we need to continue to collaborate with all the other standards bodies and interested people to evolve the specification, make sure they work together. You mentioned FIDO. One of the challenges we're having right now as a community is we are very much experts in online identity. We're not experts in offline proximity stuff, so we are teaming up, for example, with FIDO to extend OpenID for VC reach into proximity use cases, issuance and presentation, for example, using CTAP. So this is for me a role model, right? The world as we are seeing is converging. Online and offline is converging basically in the wallet, and keeping this style of collaboration between standardization bodies that might also be seen as competitors is, I think, this is very important. This is crucial going forward to really be able to realize that vision of the three-party model.
Kristina, last thoughts?
First, yeah, huge plus one to what Torsten said. I think it's very exciting if like any Android OS run POS, like once it updates, it can support OpenID for VP kind of flexibility with different credential formats, like and present credentials offline using the same protocol, same wallet, like that just super powerful to me. And like we get closer to that like integrated world. Now to my final thought. I think our action to call to action to the audience hasn't changed for the past 3 years. Like we want implementations, we want implementation feedback. Please work with us. We're super open to feedback. If it's a breaking change, please send it to us before April-ish 2025. So please, because after that, we will do our best to address it. But we might have to be creative about solutions. And then, yeah, our conformance tests for OpenID for Verifiable Credentials, VP and VCI and Hype are very rapidly maturing. They're soon be close to the place where you can integrate them in your CI/CD pipeline. So, but we need feedback there too, right? So I think please implement, please provide us feedback, please integrate conformance tests, and we'll get there. We'll get to our dream place.
Nice. Okay, well, I'll quickly announce the next episode. It is, and let me put the caption up. Where's the caption? So one of my heroes, Eric Olden, founder of many identity companies, it's going back to the 90s even. Why identity orchestration matters. Current founder and CEO of Strata, Eric Olden, next Thursday. Don't miss it. Thank you so much to the guests. Thank you, Torsten. Thank you, Kristina. Thank you, audience. And we will see you next time.
Yeah, thanks for having us here. Goodbye.
Thank you. That was great.